there has been a tremendous renewal in religion, faith, Christianity, and belief in God. And a big part of that had to do with my great friend, Charlie Kirk, a great guy, great man. Charlie was violently murdered by an assassin and martyred, really martyred for his beliefs. His wonderful wife, Erica, is with us tonight. Erica, please stand. Thank you, Erica. In Charlie's memory, we must all come together to reaffirm that America is one nation under God, and we must totally reject political violence of any kind.
It was one of the many emotional moments from last night's State of the Union address when Turning Point CEO Erica Kirk stood up as President Trump paid tribute to the late organization's late founder and her husband, Charlie Kirk. Trump credited Charlie with the religious revival movement sweeping across the country. He also described Kirk as a martyr for his faith, taking the moment to denounce political violence of any kind.
Another big moment from last evening, President Trump hammering home his crackdown on illegal immigration and putting Democrats on the spot when this happened.
I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. If you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up.
Well, some already suggesting that that moment you just watched could come back to haunt them come November. What about all that with the Vice President JD Vance, who now joins me live. And sir, thank you for your time. After a late night last night, you're back at it today, and appreciate you coming on. Good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
So the New York Times, about that moment, says, stand up. With one maneuver, Trump tries to box in Democrats. The president's ploy changed the energy inside the House chamber. At that point, would have been a mostly dutiful State of the Union address morphed into full-blown political theater. You and Speaker Johnson are only one of two people, in addition to the president, who have the same line of sight with his view. And when that happened, what did you see on the right side of the room?
Well, I saw a couple of things, Bill. First of all, obviously, most Democrats didn't stand up or clap. And you know, what a shame that is. What a sad commentary that is on the Democratic Party, that the idea that the American government should stand for American citizens, not illegal aliens, that shouldn't be controversial, but apparently it was to the Democrats. But I will say, Bill, something that I saw that probably most TV viewers didn't see was really the cowardice, because there were a few Democrats who sort of politely clapped. They didn't want to stand up. I guess maybe they were worried about being primaried by the far left fringe of their party. But they were all looking around. They weren't actually saying, you know what, I'm going to stand and support this because this is a common sense, obvious statement. They were all looking around for cues from their colleagues because they didn't have the courage to stand on their own. And that, more than anything, Bill, is the saddest commentary on the Democratic Party, that not only will they not stand for the idea that Americans should come first, they won't even have the courage of their convictions. They lean on the person to their left and their right rather than actually have some conviction. That is unfortunately what's true about Democrats in Washington today.
Well, it is being talked about a lot about how many Democrats chose not to go last night. Senator Fetterman, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, last hour said on our program that the State of the Union address has changed forever. Have you given that much thought?
I really have. I mean, a couple of things, Bill. First of all, it was a celebration of America in a very unique way. I'd never seen in a State of the Union address where you have all of these great people coming in. You know, the guy who flew the Chinook helicopter in the Venezuela mission coming in, being awarded the Medal of Honor, and then a 100-year-old Korean War veteran being awarded the Medal of Honor at the same time. You had this poor girl who was assaulted by illegal aliens who managed to survive miraculously. All of these stories, normally you hear one or two stories. It was a constant, invigorating reminder of how great our country is through the stories of these great Americans. I think that is fundamentally a difference, and I don't think that we'll ever go back. And I think the second thing, Bill, is the president used it as an opportunity to highlight the difference between congressional Republicans and congressional Democrats. You had congressional Democrats, they wouldn't stand for the idea that children shouldn't be socially transitioned without their parents' wishes. They wouldn't stand for the idea that American citizens should come first. They wouldn't stand for that innocent little girl who was assaulted by an illegal alien but managed to survive. Whatever your politics, whatever your views on immigration policy, can't we all stand and clap for an innocent young girl who shouldn't have been assaulted and was, being held by her dad? It was such a heartwarming moment. I think every American, Democrat or Republican, thought that was a great moment for our country. The only people who didn't believe that, apparently, were the congressional Democrats in that chamber. I think it shows again how broken their party is. But that revelation, I think using the State of the Union to drive home that we really do have a radical fringe in our country that's not representative of the whole, I don't think that we'll ever see a State of the Union that doesn't drive home that point.
Okay, let's get to the issue that might clip this administration, and that's the economy. On screen now, we can show you three of the most recent polls about the economy, how about Americans are feeling about it. Everything in red. Our Fox polling disapproves at 59%, Washington Post, ABC News 57%, Wall Street Journal at 54%. It seems like you're pushing a car uphill, and you've got 9 months to turn it around. You know Democrats are juiced. They are ready to vote tomorrow. Do you have enough runway to get this economy where it needs to be before November?
Well, Bill, in some ways we are pushing a car uphill because the Biden administration left us such a disaster of an economy, the highest peacetime debt in American history, skyrocketing inflation. A lot of Americans who had lost $3,000 was how much the average American had lost in take-home pay. Now, in a year, we've actually seen the average American gain about $1,200 in take-home pay. But if you're sitting at home from the perspective of the Biden administration, you are still worse off than you were when Joe Biden took over. So we are absolutely pushing that car uphill. But here's the good news, Bill. I think we're about to get over the hump. I think that tax season is around the corner. A lot of Americans, because of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, they're about to get a massive tax income refund. We've seen this massive trillions and trillions of dollars coming into our country to build new factories. Those construction jobs are starting to hit the economy. Then the manufacturing jobs, once those factories are built, will hit the economy too. So I think that we've got a lot of momentum here. But the president said this last night. We inherited a mess. Our ask to the American people is let us continue to fix this mess, make your life better. That's what the president is prioritizing, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
Seems like it is the question on behalf of many, many Americans over the next 9 months, and we'll follow that very carefully. In the meantime, you've got a new job. Here it is, the announcement last night from the president.
I'm officially announcing the war on fraud to be led by our great Vice President JD Vance. He'll get it done. And if we're able to find enough of that fraud, we will actually have a balanced budget overnight.
So here are some of the allegations. California, $8 billion in suspected COVID fraud. Minnesota, 19. Massachusetts, almost 15, and Maine, $45 million in improper Medicaid payments. As you look at this, go ahead and explain it to us, because we want to understand what the job is. And what do you think the number is?
Well, I don't know what the top line number, Bill, is, and I think that's unfortunate that nobody has ever tried to take a systematic look at how much fraud there is in the federal government. How many illegal aliens are on Medicaid? We know that it's billions and billions of dollars that should go to American citizens. It's going to illegal aliens. How many fraudulent daycare centers have been set up where that money should go to American citizens to help their kids get into childcare? Instead, it's being stolen from them by illegal aliens in our country. How much have government officials actually been complicit in this fraud because some of them have gotten wealthy, or at the least, they've gotten campaign donations from the people who have gotten rich from that fraud? The story of the American economy in so many ways during the Biden administration, Bill, is that the American citizen was ripped off for people who shouldn't be here and by politicians who should have known better. And the Trump administration, the president has asked me to take a full whole government approach to trying to understand that. And what does that mean, Bill? That means, first of all, the Department of Justice is going to be investigating and, where possible, throwing fraudsters in prison. But it's also going to mean that Scott Bessent and some of our friends at the Treasury Department, we're going to be looking at income tax records. We're going to be trying to understand how it is that the American people have been defrauded, how it is that people have used resources and programs that should go to American citizens instead have been going to fraudulent uses. There's a whole host of tools that we have that have never been used. And the president, I talked about this a couple of months ago and said, what if we just did everything that we could to stop the fraud that's being committed against the American taxpayer? The president said, great idea, let's do it. And we're going to work on that very aggressively over the next year.
Need a quick answer. Over the next year, is that the time frame? Is that 12 months?
Well, it's going to continue beyond that, but I think that we've already discovered a lot, Bill, and really I think the next year is where we're going to try to uncover as much as possible and run at this as much as we can,
okay.
But it's not going to stop after a year.
All right, we have big topics, too, on the line. You got 5 years of war in Ukraine. You've got Iran on the precipice of something. Stay tuned and stand by, Mr. Vice President. More on that when we come back.
After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue, starting it all over. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon.
So there's the president touting his push to try and end the Iranian nuclear threat. Not easy. There's a new round of talks scheduled for tomorrow in Geneva. I want to bring back the Vice President, JD Vance. And, sir, thank you again for your time. Democrats have significant concerns, especially those who were briefed yesterday behind closed doors by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. Here is Chuck Schumer. Had some comments yesterday and talked this way this morning.
The bottom line is he has an obligation to lay out to the Congress and to the American people his goals. That is how foreign policy should work. When you're forced to lay out your goals, you have to meet potential criticism. I am very worried about how Donald Trump conducts foreign policy, and particularly in this area of the world.
Sir, you can address that. Iran is not easy, as you well know. What does military success look like?
Well, I have to say, I try to understand where other people are coming from, Bill, but I don't know what Chuck Schumer is even talking about. The president has been as crystal clear as he could be. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That would be the ultimate military objective if that's the route that he chose. That is, of course, what we're trying to accomplish, as the president said, through the preferred route of diplomacy. But it's very simple. We have to get to a position where Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, cannot threaten the world with nuclear terrorism. And it's very simple. I think most Americans understand that you can't let the craziest and worst regime in the world have nuclear weapons. That's what the president is accomplishing. That's what the president has set as our goal. He's going to try to accomplish it diplomatically. But as we all know, Bill, the president has a number of other tools at his disposal to ensure this doesn't happen. He's shown a willingness to use them, and I hope the Iranians take it seriously in their negotiations tomorrow, because that's certainly what the president prefers.
Does that mean the supreme leader has to go?
Well, again, I think the president ultimately will make the decision about how to ensure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. But we're sitting down having another round of diplomatic talks with the Iranians, trying to reach a reasonable settlement. But a reasonable settlement towards what end? Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple, Bill. I think the supreme leader and everybody in their system should understand it. We've been crystal clear, and we're hopeful that we're able to come to a good resolution without the military. But if we have to use the military, the president, of course, has that right as well.
Two more topics on Ukraine and Russia. 5 years now. Eastern Europe has been exploding. Is Vladimir Putin simply putting you off in these on-again, off-again talks as they go?
Bill, I think we've been engaged in very, very deliberate negotiations with both the Russians and the Ukrainians. Obviously, the Russians have some red lines, the Ukrainians have some red lines, and the president has just set the entire team from Marco Rubio on down to try to bring the killing to a close. You know, it's hard. As the president has said multiple times, he thought this was going to be the easiest war to solve. I agreed with him. It has turned out to be much more difficult. But I think that we're making progress, Bill. I think we're making progress with both the Russians and the Ukrainians. And we're just going to keep working at it. You know, eventually we're either going to be successful or we're not going to be. Right now, I think the president has some good optimism that we can bring this thing to a successful close. It's bad for the world. It's bad for America. So we're going to keep working at it.
You can certainly understand how people look at this from the outside and think that Putin is just buying time, right?
Well, Bill, you know, this point, I understand this point, and sure, I'm sure that Vladimir Putin has his military objectives, and obviously he hasn't stopped the killing, even though the president wants that very much to happen. But the way to solve this is to continue to engage in diplomacy. And so that's what the president has asked us to do. We're under no illusions that these guys are going to, you know, meet in the middle of a field, give each other a hug and sing Kumbaya. That's why we're engaged in the diplomacy that we are engaged in. We are optimistic that we can get to a point where both the Russians and the Ukrainians feel they've accomplished enough of what they need to bring the killing to a stop. That's what the president has set us out to do.
All right, big stakes on both those topics now. Let's end on a patriotic note. Last night, the red, white, and blue, and gold. Watch.
Now we're winning too much. And I say, no, no, no. You're going to win again. You're going to win big. You're going to win bigger than ever. And to prove that point, here with us tonight is a group of winners who just made the entire nation proud. The men's gold medal Olympic hockey team. Come on in.
So for those of us who weren't there, how much fun was it to have those guys around for a day?
Bill, it was so electric, so fun to have him in the White House, obviously at the State of the Union. You may not have been able to see on TV, but Mike Johnson and I were probably the only two people in the House who couldn't see the team when they walked out because they were sort of directly above us in the chamber. But we're so proud of those guys, and it was just a great moment for the country. Again, Bill, the State of the Union was really just a celebration of our country, of our war heroes, past and present, of all the great things that we've been able to accomplish over the last year, of the incredible Olympic hockey team that won gold medal, both the men and the women's team, of course. It was just a very, very cool moment, a very patriotic moment, but I really think it set the tone for the whole speech. A celebration of our country. We ought to be proud of our country. We've had a great and proud history, but under this leadership, under the president's leadership, I really do believe, Bill, the best is yet to come. We just got to keep working at it.
All right, we'll watch the women come to the White House very soon. We'll cover that then. Sir, thank you for your time. I know you go to Wisconsin tomorrow. The president goes to Corpus Christi, Texas, and we'll see how the message is received. JD Vance, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, Aisha.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.